All right, welcome back to the shop. Today, we're gonna start a new series on the restoration of this over 100-year-old tabletop. We're not gonna be refinishing this whole table. The character of the table is gonna maintain. We just need to fix a few problems and come in a little closer, and I'll show you what we have. You're gonna see over the years, this large crack has opened up. The wood is warped, it's expanded, but it didn't have anywhere to go, so it created a big crack here. So we're gonna fix that first. And then we're going to remove all these old nails, and you'll see this putty that's here every 12 inches. We need to remove this, remove the nails, so that way we can clamp and glue this thing back up perfectly. The customer wants to leave that original patina, but we have to remove this finish and keep it from being sanded all the way down. They want it to still look like a 100-year-old table when we're done. Let me show you how to do it. All right, the first thing I need to do on this table is remove all that old white putty to get the nails visible so we can see how we're going to remove those. So what you want to do is clean up all the wood around that edge so that way when the nail comes out, it doesn't blow out and splinter the top of your tabletop. We're trying to do as minimal damage to this as possible so that way it has that original patina. So one of the ways you know that these tables are old is that there'll be these old nails like this. Sometimes they'll be square heads, sometimes they'll just be just normal heads like this. If it was a Phillips head screw, then you know that this table is much newer than what it looks like it is on the outside. They faked a lot of tables and made them look more rustic. That's one of the telltale signs that this is an old table. All right, so now that we have all the putty removed, we're going to take a hammer and a block of wood and tap from underneath. We don't want to damage this any more than it already is. We're going to try to get those nails to loosen up a little bit. The next step in the process is removing the plank of this table, but first we have to take these nails out safely. Come in a little bit close. This tabletop is a soft wood, either a pine or a fir. So if you use the hammer and just pry into it, you're going to damage the tabletop. We don't want to do that. So what I like to use is either a block of wood or either one of these rulers, something metal, just something hard that's going to keep you safe. So what I like to do is take my pliers first and see if the nail is loose enough to pry up without the hammer. And this one is. So you can see this one comes out real easily. Use your metal as a pry bar, like support. So just that easy. All right, so now that I got this nail out, I need to do the next 5, so follow along. We got all of the nails removed. Now it's time just to pop this off so we can prepare it for glue. Let's see how easy it is. So yeah, there's some broken parts there. First step we're going to do in the gluing process is taking a wire brush. We're going to clean off all this old dirt from where it was cracked all these years. A lot of dirt, food, grime, whatever the case, dust, got it in these corners. So first I take an old wire brush and just slowly go back and forth. Be careful here because this is where you're going to get splinters in your hands if you go too quick. You know, ask me how I know. I've been stabbed by this old wood plenty of times and they're not fun to remove. All right, so now that we have this clean, we're going to plug these holes here from the original nails. So when we glue to clamp this up, it's going to close up tighter and it's going to move the nails over. So we don't want those nails to come back and then blow out these sides. So what I do first, take a little dowel, maybe add a little glue into the hole, take it all the way down and just snap it off. Wipe the extra glue off, cleanly. So now what we'll do is we'll pre-drill these holes first so the nail goes in, doesn't blow anything out, doesn't crack, and we'll be good to go. When I took off that plank, I noticed underneath there's a little crack right up in here on this leg. So now's the only time that we're going to be able to glue it up. Take a little bit of my super glue, let it run down these little cracks. You can see it closer now that it's got a little bit of the glue on it. Take a little of the activator. Wipe this clean, squeeze it, hold it for a few seconds. Okay, now we're ready to go. Let's move on to the next step. All right, the first thing we're gonna do on this table glue up is glue down this little splinter first. If you don't do that, it could just be another loose spot that's going to break off over time. So we're going to start there, then we're going to add glue to both sides of here and the table, and then get it clamped up. It's always good to have a clean water and a clean rag to wipe off all that excess glue. The cleaner you make it here, the easier it will be when you go to sanding and stripping it. And it's also important to look up underneath because it's probably dripping like crazy underneath as well. These little details matter when the customer comes and sees it. There's no glue sitting on the bottom. It just levels up your refinishing game. All right, now it's time to add a few clamps. Follow me. We're going to space these out in between these nails so that way we can apply the nails while it glues up and dries. All right, so now that we have the clamps all laid out, we're going to start tightening them up slowly and evenly. Make sure this end is lined up first, or else you're going to glue it a little off-centered and the table is going to need more work in the next stages. You can see the glue starting to pull itself out, squeeze out through all the little corners. Once again, clean all the excess off. There's no reason to pull and use carbide scrapers for that. Look how simple this is. So then finally, I'm going to put a big C-clamp on to make sure that it doesn't try to bend up while it's being clamped and glued. This is going to hold it down to the surface of the skirt of the table. Doesn't need a lot of pressure, just a little to hold it down. Here we go. Just finishing cleaning up the glue that oozed out. Little quick tip from the shop. Your goal is not to tighten these down as much as possible. You want to get it firm, solid, but if you squeeze too much, that glue is going to come out. There's nothing that's going to be actually bonding the two pieces of wood together. So you don't want, you want to get it tight, but you don't need to be forcing it, and that'll be more chance of damaging areas, damaging corners as well. All right, so now that we've got it all glued up, now it's time to put the nails back in so it all sets at the same time. But first, remember how we plugged those holes underneath? we're going to need to pre-drill it again. Make sure we get to new pieces, new piece of meat underneath. Our goal is not to blow out the skirt of this table and then cause more damage that unnecessarily. So we're going to do this. Take our nail. Get your nail set. You don't want to cause any more damage, like I just said. Okay, we're back to the shop. We already removed all the clamps. We let the glue dry up overnight, and I started filling up these nail holes. The reason we're doing that is so that way the stripper doesn't get inside of all these holes. It's going to make it harder to clean, prep, get stuff prepared for the sanding process. So let me show you how I did it. First, take your color, putty knife, cut straight across. You want a nice even mixture. That's a hardener, and then the actual epoxy. You're going to start mixing it up. Add a little bit of this magic liquid to it to get it to soften up a little bit more. It'll also add up a little bit more working time. It'll take a little longer for it to dry, which is a bonus as well. You want to mix this up for around 30 seconds to a minute. Okay, after about a minute, it should start looking like this. You don't see any more of that white in there. Now it's ready to go in these holes. First, take the putty knife, press it in. And what you're trying to do is keep it as minimal as possible. You want to keep this as clean. You try not to add any extra and add more sanding later in the process. This will take you years to really perfect getting it this clean. The epoxy is harder to work with. Another little shop tip, if you use this magic liquid, clean this, wipe it across the grain. It's going to remove a lot of it and even keep you from having to sand as thoroughly. So now that I have a little bit extra, I don't want to waste it. I'm going to go through and fill some of these small cracks in the same process. We don't want the stripper to get in there as well. So take your putty knife, put it on, clean it cross grain or little circles, and that'll help clean this up and keep you from having to sand it later on. Today what we're going to do is we're going to strip the top of this table. A lot of times these old tables, we're just going to restore them, clean them up, and then get them back into the spray booth. But this one here has been used every day from the homeowner for many, many years. This finish is sticky, tacky. You can't feel it here in the video, but if we were able to spray over this, it's just not going to adhere. My lacquer is not going to hold up long term. So let's get this stripped down. So first thing I'm going to do, put on my thick, heavy gloves for this stripper. We have our stripper already put in a can here. We're just going to strip a small section, show you how to do this. It's real quick, easy. You want to be really clean with it and do not make a mess. Just let it sit. We're going to let it sit for a few minutes, kind of eat up this old lacquer, this old shellac that may be on here, and get back down to this raw wood. Okay, then now that we have a nice coat on here, we've let this sit for a few minutes. I'm going to grab my little bucket and a putty knife and just gently take off this old finish. So we got that first layer off. Then we're going to want to take a little bit of steel wool and scrub it clean, wrap around these edges, get the edges cleaned up as well. We may need one more quick coat, but it looks like it's pretty good with just one pass. Okay, we're back. The tabletop is stripped. Now it's time to clean it. Normally, there are two options that you can use here. Either water with TSP, which you see a lot of videos that are doing that, but you could also use acetone in a rag or acetone with steel wool to get that last detail. The only problem with that is how expensive acetone is now. You know, the last few years, the acetone has increased in price. It's not worth doing this on every piece. So we want this to dry quickly, and we don't want to have that water pop that you get from the TSP. So here we go. So I'm going to take just my coarse steel wool, dip it in a little bit of the acetone, and just kind of polish clean, wipe clean, but take your rag at the same time so it doesn't go dripping down the sides and ruining the bottom, skirt. See, we almost ruined the piece right there. See, accidents do happen. All right, once the steel wool is done, we toss that aside, and I'll get my rag and just take fresh acetone and just do one more wipe down with it. I don't know what this is here to achieve. It's just something I like to do just to make sure it's perfectly clean. Now we're ready to do a light sanding before we get it in the spray booth. All I'm going to do, take a little bit of sandpaper, 150 grit and then 220 grit, and we're just going to do a light sand. We're just trying to smooth it out before we get the stain and the finish on it. So we're not trying to take off any of the damage. We're not trying to fix anything. We want to leave that 100-year-old patina and that age into the wood. Okay, so now that the sanding is done, we blew everything off, it's ready to put some stain on it. So first, the most important part is get the stain mixed up really well. You shouldn't feel any kind of sediment or anything settled at the bottom. It should just be the bottom metal of the can that you feel. So for this table, the customer wants to go back to that original, beautiful orange color that it was. So we're going to use rag, my stain, and just apply. Don't let it drip. Don't let it run down the sides of the legs. Make sure to get it in any of the little imperfections. That's most important. It's just preference, but I like to do the perimeter first and then go back and do the top. Just something I've always done for years. All right, so now the perimeter is done. It's ready to do the top. You can get the rag a little bit more saturated here, so you have a large piece to do. So same thing, like painting, I like to just overlap. This ensures you get an even color, even tone all the way through. Take off your excess, get a little bit more, and just finish up the rest of it here. So I like where the table is at right here. I don't think I'm going to wipe it off. I'm just going to let this sit, dry, soak in evenly, and we'll get it in the spray booth later this afternoon. We're ready to get this tabletop back in the spray booth and get a few coats of sealer on it. So let's go. Okay, welcome to the spray booth. What we're going to do now, get our gun, add some sealer in, put our mask on, and get spraying. All right, we're gonna let this dry tonight, come back tomorrow, sand the sealer, and spray the final coats for the grand reveal. Okay, we're back. The tabletop is dried overnight from the sealer. All we need to do, take my sanding sponge, knock it down a little bit, get it to smooth out, and we'll get it back in the spray booth for the final coats. So because this grit is about a 320 to 400 grit sanding sponge, we can go straight with the grain, we can cut sideways, go in little circles. I kind of prefer the little polishing motion. That makes it just easier to do, cuts the sealer a little bit easier. So we're gonna finish the rest of this top, knock out the legs, wipe it clean, and get it back in the spray booth. All right, first step we have to do inside the booth, take my tack cloth, wipe the top of the surface off, make sure there's no imperfections, any dust, anything like that. So we want that smooth surface when the next coat goes on. All right, now that that's clean, we're gonna grab our gun, add a little bit of the toner in. I wanna richen the top up a little bit. It's a little blah looking. I want it to kind of pop, stand back out again like it was when we picked it up. Get on my mask and we'll get spraying. We're gonna let the color coat flash off for about 5 minutes. That means we're just gonna let it dry, let it evaporate for a few minutes before we put the top coat on. In the video, it may look like I spray a lot of color on, and it's not true. I may spray a lot of coats, but I make that dye stain mixture very light, very low concentration, so it doesn't change the color that quickly. All right, we let the table flash off. We're gonna clean the gun out, take out the toner, clean with a little splash of acetone, and then put in our top coat. Let's get spraying. it looks like it's really shiny here in the video, but this is gonna dry overnight, lay to a perfectly dead flat, and it's gonna give that appearance of that perfect French antique dining table. So stay tuned for tomorrow and see the final reveal. All right, the restoration of this antique farmhouse table is done, and it's ready to go back to the customer. Remember, we tore off all the old putty, we took out the nails carefully, we glued up all the splinters, then we glued up the whole tabletop with clamps, cleaned all the glue, top and bottom. We took it off, we stripped it, got it down to the bare wood. Then we took 150 grit and 220 grit sandpaper, sanded the top by hand. Then we stained it, got it back to that original character of the piece. Then we put it in the spray booth. We sprayed a few coats of sealer, a few coats of toner, and then a nice flat sheen to give that original patina. We have successfully brought this piece back to life. We've preserved all the original character of this dining table, and now it's going to get a new life in its home.